Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Lewicki. Following Russia's recent military adventurism in NATO airspace, Poland had a prominent presence during the latest session of the United Nations, voicing a stark warning against Moscow's plans. Despite political differences at home, both Poland's President Karol Nawrocki and Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski remained largely in agreement as to the Russian threat, and their message coincided with Trump's turnaround on the subject of the war in Ukraine, with unusually stern words on Russia coming from the US president in a social media post. So can Poland and other countries of the region exert powerful enough influence to make sure America's involvement in Ukraine and in Central and Eastern Europe in general does not waver in the face of Russian imperialism? Joining us now is Marcin Bużański, Director at the Center for Diplomacy and Negotiation of the Collegium Civitas. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning. Pleasure to be with you.
So first of all, let's take a look at President Karol Nawrocki's speech at the UN General Assembly. What are your impressions? Do you think it was a good speech? Did it actually manage to convey the message that we here in Central and Eastern Europe are eager to actually have others all across the world heed due to the fact that Russia has been acting the way it did recently?
I think the president's speech was pretty strong, strongly worded, and I think overall it was good. It was his first speech in the General Assembly, so an opportunity to introduce himself to the world. But more importantly, I think it really hit the right notes. It hit the right points when it comes to the most important things for Poland and really for international security globally. So in particular, of course, the question of Russia's invasion in Ukraine and more broadly Russia's activities in Poland, in Estonia and other allied countries, which are a blatant violation of the Charter of the United Nations. And I think this was very clear in the president's message. I think very importantly, it also echoed very strong remarks by the foreign minister Radosław Sikorski a day earlier in the Security Council. So all of this in concert with other allies, in concert with leadership of the European Union, with Ursula Andreas present, all of this, Ursula von der Leyen, present, all of this made really a very strong impression that first of all, the allies are united. Second of all, that Russia has really escalated its actions. And third of all, that we can have a concentrated and similar voice coming also from the United States. And I think that's the final and most important point, that both the remarks by the foreign minister Sikorski and the speech of the president had similar tones with the speech of the new ambassador to the UN of the US, Michael Waltz, with the speech of President Donald Trump, who in all of its chaotic form really pushed Russia very strongly. His remarks towards Russia were strongest ever, I think, on record when it comes to possible consequences for Ukraine. So all in all, this, I think, is a positive result for Poland and the West. Of course, the question is whether this will really follow with implementation with concrete steps.
And do you think that President Nawrocki mentioning the colonial nature of Russia's war, of Russia's attempted expansion, do you think that was a nod to the global South?
Absolutely, and a good one and a necessary one. And frankly speaking, in the last years, we've seen not enough effort by Western countries, by NATO allies, to change the narrative that Russia is pushing, that the West is responsible for all bad things in the world, and it's implementing neo-colonial policies under the flag of the United States. Well, of course, this is hypocrisy. Russia is the country that's the invader, that is breaking international law, that has invaded a neighbor country, and all of this needs to be really sent as a strong message message to the South. It is the more difficult today because we're facing, of course, the slaughter that we see in Gaza and Israel's terrible war at the moment. Israel, of course, is the closest ally to the U.S., and this is played very strongly by Russia and by the South also as showing that the West is responsible for problems with the international security architecture. Well, this is why it's so important that these narratives are being produced in a right way. And here, the messaging from President Nawrocki was right and is really needed and has been, as I mentioned, echoed by other leaders. But this is a good step, but it's not enough. Much more activities here need to be undertaken, and I think in a concentrated effort, because the global South is currently somewhere in between, and probably even moving closer to Russia's narrative. So this war of narratives globally, we've been losing that war as the West, and this really has to change. So in terms of messaging, this time at the United Nations General Assembly, I think these were positive steps.
And also in the global South, there are difficult partners like China. You know how complex the relationships between China, the United States and Europe are. In the light of that, do you think that the fact that Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski actually met with the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, could this also have been an effort in a similar direction? Diplomatically speaking, China is not entirely neutral in this conflict. Do you think that the narrative coming from Central and Eastern Europe can still get through nevertheless and exert at least some influence in China?
Well, I would really separate China from the countries of the global South. I think this is what China would want, to be seen as one of those and been seen as the leader of countries of the global South, but it really isn't. It's really playing towards its own interest. I don't think it'll be convinced by any narratives. I think it's a question of reading, on one hand, China's interest and seeing where we can push China to exert some influence on Russia, because China, of course, has one of the key roles in sustaining Russia's capabilities of continuing the war. And also President Trump was very clear here that stopping the buying of energy resources from countries such as China and India will be key here in order to prevent Russia from further escalation. But what's important is that China understands also the interests that lay here. And Poland's role here was important with the passage of the train cargo that goes through our border with Belarus, which is critical for China. It accounts for about 13% of its exports to Europe. So, of course, very important. And here there is, I think, an angle to push China to at least restrain Russia a bit more. Now, when it comes to a global stage, of course, the US wants to be much tougher on China. Europe is somewhere in between when it comes to any possible tariffs, any possible trade deals and sanctions, and particularly in terms of stopping the collaboration in areas of critical importance such as digital, cyber, energy, and critical infrastructure. So all of these areas are somewhere in a negotiating table, and the US here would want Europe to be much stronger against China. So the strategy here should be to connect, to do business, but not in those areas, and still to be working hand in hand with the United States. But this has to go both ways. So for Europe, in order to implement that strategy, the US also has to be very clear that it continues its security guarantees, its role in NATO, its umbrella. And interestingly, this is what Donald Trump was pointing out, that Poland has full guarantees, that the NATO has full guarantees, and that US will defend it and could even expand its options if the other Western allies play towards its strategy towards China, stop buying any kind of energy from Russia, which probably means buy it from the US, and play in concert here. So this could be a strategy to go hand in hand. But of course, as we know, it's not that we can count on every word from the United States. It's a trust but verify situation. So this means that when we look at the global South, we have to separate China and make the global South understand that China is also a global player that's tried to expand its influences, not the advocate of the global South. And this is another battle of narratives here that needs to be conducted on the diplomatic front. And of course, to do this effectively, we have to do it in concert, because let's be very frank with each other. Poland has no way of influencing China. Poland has no way of influencing India individually as a country. It's a simple matter of scale. The way that we can do it is when we are united and working in concert as part of the European Union, as part of a NATO alliance, and this is what we should be working towards. A well-coordinated diplomatic effort, speaking with one voice as allies.
And speaking of working in concert, do you think that Poland will be able to play what seems to be a handicap to its advantage in its relations between, with the United States and Europe, which are, as you've mentioned, quite intricate, right? Because the US might be asking for one thing, the European Union might be going the other way, so you actually need to balance that. And we have a president and a government coming from two different political camps. At home, they are often in disagreement. But do you think that it's possible to develop some sort of understanding, perhaps even a strategy, that would allow this to play in our favor, with the president having good contacts in Washington and the government, on the other hand, being able to coordinate things with our allies in Europe? Do you think there is a chance of this happening? And perhaps, are there any signs of such an understanding already beginning to form to some extent?
Well, on one hand, of course, I think it's possible to happen, and we've seen this on occasions now in this new relationship with the new president, and this both speeches and the joint presence at the General Assembly are a good example of this. But we have to understand that this work in concert, it should be an absolute essential necessity. We are really at risk. We've had Russian drones coming into our country, being shot down. This is an important escalation. For several years now, we have a war next to us. Poland is a frontline country at a very strong risk of being attacked even more. And we really cannot afford, as a country, the type of political battles on this front, because we have to engage the US and our other allies in the best possible concentrated effort. And here, the fact that the president is from the same political camp as President Donald Trump could be, of course, an advantage, and we should press it as much as we can. At the same time, we also have to be very realistic. The United States, will pat us on the back, and we might have some nice words and good diplomatic photo opportunities.
But actions matter above all, right? Unfortunately, I have to park our conversation there. But thank you very much for joining us here today and explaining all these intricacies of foreign policy. Marcin Bużański was our guest here on TVP World. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you very much.
And I'm Jonasz Rywliński. You're watching TVP World. Stay with us for more.